But the question of money or cost in the execution of this.
That's probably because I'm stingy.
Well, that's a personal thing. But it's interesting, nobody else has raised the fact that, it's costing money to do it, you know.
You see work of this nature, for example, at the first meeting of the first Dáil.
Yes. And Grattan's Parliament.
And you can actually see in both this version of it and this one and this, that there is a sense, it's clearly an assembly of sorts.
Yes.
It isn't a public house or a market.
He didn't want to have everybody sitting looking at po-faced. It's at a division. It's at a vote time. So there is interaction. There is movement within the chamber. All the ministers are going to be on their feet, for example. That's what he's trying to achieve: the sense of movement and people looking across at each other. And that.
They're all very serious too.
Yes. Well, it's a serious chamber. Isn't it?
Well, the unionists are looking much more serious than the rest of us. You can see the gender balance is slightly lacking in this.
Yeah.
Is that Pat Doherty up in that second? His tier up here, up behind Conor Murphy?
It is, yeah. I need to move the women about to, space them out to provide colour as well, because of all the suits. Last night I painted Barbara de Bruyne over David Irvine, and I'll be taking out John Taylor as well. For a woman, 2 women probably.
Now, if you're doing this, would you concentrate completely on this? You wouldn't be doing any other thing, or do you?
No, these were what I was working on in between, just to break away from the suits.
Yeah, well, sometimes if I'm writing stuff, sometimes it's helpful to go and write a totally different subject.
Do you get much time to write?
Yeah. And well behind deadline now. I was supposed to have material finished by September.
What kind of book is it?
It's actually about the peace process.
Right.
I call on Mr. Gerry Adams as nominating officer of the political party for which the formula laid down in standing orders gives the next highest figure, to select a ministerial portfolio and to nominate a person to hold it who is a member of Sinn Féin and of this Assembly. Mr. Adams.
I name Martin McGuinness, Martin McInesa, Mar Ira Atticus. I nominate Martin McGuinness as Minister for Education.
Will Mr. Martin McGuinness confirm that he is willing to take up office? Order! Order! I am calling for order at present.
Just take us through those you immediately identify in the portrait at this stage.
Well, obviously I see David Trimble and Dermot Nesbitt, John Taylor, Nigel Dodds, Peter Robinson, Sammy Wilson, Paul Berry, Monica, Gerry Adams sitting beside her, rather young looking Seamus Malin.
He'd be flattered. This is also tentative. The artist is working in roughly 2 colours at this point in time. The game will change completely when we get to the final product. So
as I look at John Taylor now, he will change?
His skin tone, everything. The skin tones all change and become more natural. But the whole thing is to get some sense of movement, interaction, etc. Now, there's going to be change. There will be changes taking place in this. I think he intends. You see, Noel is constantly taking people in and putting them out.
I presume this is Mark Durgan?
You see the way it's going? It's going to go like this. David Trimble, Mark Durgan, Seamus Malin, and then it's going to go from there down to the low corner, down to the low corner. So there's a lot of intellectualizing taking place. There's all the thinking of the artist. He's been intellectualizing and filtering through his mind the various aspects of this. was just observing, Martin, how unflinching you are in your posture and your pose. You've been sitting there for about 35, 40 minutes and you didn't budge.
Where do you think that comes from?
I haven't a clue.
Do you think it comes from all the very long hours and days and weeks that I spent in Castlereagh Interrogation Centre?
I couldn't comment. That's a very subjective view. I think you'd have to expand on that.
Looking at the spot on the branchman's nose?
Obviously, you were well trained.
Well, we used to have this almost unreal situation where you would go into these interrogation rooms and these two detectives would sit across the table and try to stare you out. So that was a little game I embarked on with them, and it was a matter of seeing who would blink first, and became quite good at it after all the practice, because the branchman kept changing, you see, of course.
Now that you've admitted, though, that you had a past and that you were in the IRA, if you could just revisit that period for us. It's very evident that you have emerged from a deeply religious Catholic family. As a Catholic of my own persuasion background, it's something with which I could never come to terms with, actual killing and being a Catholic. From your perspective, how did you ever reconcile that? What informs you to allow you to do the two things, to be a Catholic and to be part of the IRA?
I was asked one time by the Derry Journal to describe myself, and I said in one sentence that I was a product of British injustice. And I often do tell the story about what were very formative days in Derry, whenever, for example, there was no real IRA at all, well, pardon the pun, and at a time whenever citizens in the city were being brutalised by the forces of the state, and people who were themselves mass goers and indeed daily communicants. I saw them on the streets with petrol bombs and stone. I saw them filling bottles, and I saw them encouraging young people and indeed themselves participating in attacks on the RUC and the British Army. Obviously, now when you fast forward 30 odd years, ask the question, then the answer is that you have to be there to experience what happened. You have to understand the emotionalism of the time, and you also have to recognise that throughout the world there is a belief, whenever tyranny is being used against the people, that the people actually do have a right to defend themselves. And you also have to remember, you know, we were 18 and 19 and 20 years of age. You're not talking about people who were, you know, mature in years, who were, you know, 40, 50 years of age. You were talking about people who had seen violence being used against a community that have effectively been treated like second-class citizens since the foundation of the state. And so it was easy to rationalise all of that. There was no difficulty whatsoever. I mean, I often recall people, particularly at the retreats in Derry, you know, going up to confession, and they would come out and relate these stories afterwards about getting into the priest who maybe came from County Cork or County Kerry, that they had been involved in violence on the street against the British Army or the RUC, and been told effectively, well, don't be worrying about that wasn't a son.
Terrorists, whatever their hue, colour, orange, green, polka dotted, have no place in a democratic assembly. Perhaps the biggest indictment, Mr. Speaker, of the total falsity of Jerry and Martin's brave new world in which unionists will be cherished equally is the vicious, the vitriolic, the prejudiced rant of Mary Ellis.
Take me through the images. How do the images come across to you at this stage?
There we have a collection of Democrats and former assassins in political communion.
Wouldn't it be great, though, to see a collection of former loyalists there who were affiliated with their past, sitting in the chamber, sharing
You say former loyalists. I mean, I don't accept that for a moment. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there is absolutely no distinction between the loyalist representatives that are still intimately associated, to use a media term, with the thinking of the UVF or the UDA than there is between the political figures of Sinn Féin and those whom they represent, those whom they honour, those whom they say are great men, heroes, the sort of heroes who shot bread servers in the back with their bread tray or murdered teachers in front of their pupils.
Okay, we could talk about this all night. Where would Big Bob like to be in this portrait?
Well, I suppose wherever I could be the greatest irritant, the conscience of these people, because you know, when I made my maiden speech in the House of Commons, I made the point that when opposition and government are in grave and holy communion and agreement, somebody somewhere is being shafted.
Right.
The real purpose of the House of Commons and of this Assembly should have been cross-party debate between government and opposition. The trouble with the Assembly, and I think maybe the question that will arise out of this painting, is the absence of government and opposition. What we have here is a big mix, and the artist has got it right in that sense, because this big mix is what the Assembly is. There is no opposition. There's also an atmosphere about it of the Tower of Babel.
Why does a consummate unionist like you cling to a British government whilst you know that ultimately the goal of the British system is to disengage?
That's not difficult to answer. I don't cling to the British government or the British goal. I cling to the identity of being British as opposed to being Irish, because it is what I am.
Do you feel British?
Yes, of course I do.
Do you think you have much in common with the people in Finchley?
I have a lot in common with the people in Scotland. I have a lot in common with the people of Leeds and Yorkshire.
What have you in common with them?
Well, I'll tell you what I have in common with. I have in common with them all the things that we're now hearing about who our Great Britain is. I have in common with them a common historical heritage, of shared experiences in peace and in war. For my own family, a working class family, and therefore it's an oral tradition of fighting in the British Army in the Boer War and in the Great War. My father, my uncles, my brothers and sisters in the Second World War. I have common, their literature is my literature. Shakespeare is as much mine as it is the voter in Finchley. Wellington and Nelson are as much my heroes. Cromwell is as much a part of my history as it is of anyone on the mainland, possibly more. I mean, but it's talking about politics. It's the observations, and again I quote off the cuff, you know, for why does treason never prosper? Because if it prospers, 'tis not treason. In other words, if you're Gerry Adams or anybody else and you are a terrorist, but by your terror you become the government, you become the power, then what you did wasn't treasonable. What you did wasn't terrorism. What you did was a fight for freedom, which you now enjoy.
Does the fact that Martin McGuinness, there at the heart of government, you might say, even where he's located in the portrait, does that offend you?
Yes, it does. It does. It offends me because he is a man whom I believe was up to his elbows in murder. I believe he was involved in murder. I believe he authorized murder. And I believe that such people should be properly an object of offence.
But the IRA would continue to plan their acts of terror and carry them out as they wanted to. And since the Belfast Agreement was signed, the IRA have been updating its weapons and bomb techniques in Colombia. They have been rearming from both Russia and Florida. They have been targeting leading political, judicial, security, forensic and loyalist figures using updated intelligence files. They have been identified by the police as the only major line of inquiry into the breaking in at Special Branch headquarters in Castlereagh. They have murdered over a dozen people since 1998.
Hello there.
Nice to meet you.
This is the
Not
artist,
too bad.
Noel Murphy,
Yes.
Dr. Paisley.
Where are you going to put me, Noel?
Right here in the corner.
Here. Right, that's right. That's my turn. That's where I sit.
But it means I can do it quite life-size, quite big.
That's right.
Near enough, yes. I don't want to,
No.
be lost.
No. Right,
That is.
good.
But some people are going to have to go to the back.
Yes.
And it's just unfortunate. Also, the idea was to have all the ministers standing so they stand out. But I'm putting these two sitting down.
Yes, quite so.
Yeah,
They have don't partake.
no.
They
And
don't
it's all right.
partake of the pig.
Yes.
The pork.
Yeah.
They're circumcised. He certainly have flattered this boy here. He's not as good looking as that.
Poor old Michael McGimpsey. Huh?
We call him the funeral director. It's just,
Why do you call him the funeral
because he's
director?
so miserable looking. Oh, yes. Even if he's handing out money, he's miserable looking.
Is that not defamatory or
No, it's
libelous?
not at all. You look at him. If you got him to look at milk, it would become buttermilk. It would.
What about your offspring? How do you
yeah.
think he's shaping up?
He's very grim looking. Look at it.
Yeah.
This portrait's not finished yet, of course.
This portrait is a sheep among the goats.
What's your favourite verse? What's your favourite chapter, verse in the Bible?
My favourite verse is, "As for me, that utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in bonds." Ephesians 6:19 and 20. I added the bit about the bonds after I went to jail. It used to be just Ephesians 6:19, but when I went to jail, being an ambassador in bonds, I added the
You
other.
founded your own church, you founded your own independent Orange Order, you founded your own political party, and you're now, are you telling me that you rewrote parts of the Bible as well?
No.
The Bible?
No, because that is the scripture. The scripture is, Ephesians 6:19 says, "As for me, that utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel." The next verse says, "For which I am an ambassador in bonds." Well, I couldn't add that when I never was in jail, but when I was in jail, I added that. No, I didn't add to the Bible. Only the Church of Romance to the Bible, Mr. Mallie, not me. How to get that dig in at him?
Do you remember our first encounters?
I do. I remember the first encounter. You met me at my house. I had just bought the house, and you come dandering round, and you said, "My name is Eamonn Mallie. I'm taking up an appointment with the downtown radio." And he says, "I hope you'll speak to me." And I said to you, in a very sharp way, "Why wouldn't I speak to you?" The next time I went round to the house, the whole bay window was blown up. UVF laid a bomb at it, blew the whole thing up. And then when we moved in, they fired bullets through the bedroom window. So we had a welcoming party.
And was that a UVF?
Yes, the paramilitaries were always very hard on me. I mean, their literature was terrible, filthy.
We are seeking to immortalize you.
Well, if that's my only hope of immortalization, sitting in an old ruined warehouse with Mr. Mallie, the Lord have mercy on our souls.
This was a short period in my life. Some give more than others. So it's quite hard to say or criticise the ones who didn't give all of themselves. It's just the nature of them as human beings. But I find it very hard now to knock any of them personally. I'm more respectful of them now as individuals. And it's going to be very hard for me now to become the usual sectarian bigot that I always was. The main thing what I wanted to achieve through this whole process was a sense of coming out of the darkness. That we came out of the 30 years of darkness through the nature of this peace process and the fact that this room now exists. But also the studio was blackened out as well. So I lived in darkness except for the artificial light. And now that this painting has finished, I want to let the light all back in.
I spent most of my reporting life standing this side of white tapes, bomb scenes, shootings, year after year. The death toll, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100, as high as 500 in 1972. And that's why I believe that the Assembly will rise again, Phoenix-like, because minds are changing slowly. This portrait, it may not be the greatest thing that has ever happened, but there is an absolute tolerance within each and every one of those politicians to be seen for posterity in the same frame, be they from the SDLP, Sinn Féin, the Ulster Unionists, the Democratic Unionist Party. They're all now in this portrait together. Things are changing. It's evolution. That's what gives me hope.
Right from an early stage, when you brought us along some initial pictures, before we got onto this at all, before we'd even agreed on who was going to do it, I was very taken by the whole style. But this has really worked out even better than I'd hoped for. I can look at this and it's just like looking down from the speaker's chair, you know? You can see them all and you know them, their characters. It's not just a picture. And it says a lot that's very insightful, I think, about where the politics is. There are some particularly striking things. The figures, the choice of John Hume and Ian Paisley at these two sides, in a sense holding it in another sense looking back to what they are leaving behind as they gradually move on. And each of the individuals too, and where they are and who they relate to. This almost visionary picture of Gerry Adams, looking out again into what he sees as the future. Undoubtedly, it's a different future that David Trimble is looking out to, and you can feel that as you look at the two of them. I think the whole process of producing this painting has been important. I have an old friend in the States who describes it as cultural leadership. the potential that art has to actually make a difference. And this piece of work, in the process of its production, I think has been really rather important. The painting would be constructed around a division. I guess we call it The House Will Divide. It seemed a not inappropriate name for a portrait of this assembly. Eamonn, would you help me do the honours?
What? I still don't know who that is beside me. It's Mr.
I think it's you, Kieran.
You see Dermot Nesbitt? See Martin McGuinness?
Yes.
Just above Martin McGuinness. I think that's me.
Oh, yes, yes.